find my screen here. So I thought what we might like to do, or what you might like to do, is on foot of what you've just seen, and also you know, from your own experience of gardening, or whatever, even if you're just embarking on some gardening, would you like to put questions to us, to the panel, um, and we can discuss whatever it is you want to raise, and we have plenty of experts in the house now who can address your questions. So I see that there's been quite a bit of chat here. So some of this is hellos. Thanks, guys. Hi. The Kingfisher Project. Hi. Volume is low. Okay, right then. Grand. We got that sorted eventually. Yeah, there is captions, by the way, on the YouTube videos. So if you want to watch them on YouTube, you'll be able to switch on the closed captions. Is wild cherry the same as bird cherry? So there are a few different cherry species. Fiona, would you like to take that question?
Yes, I followed it after there with a comment just to
Oh, did
say
you?
they're two different species. There are both native in Ireland, bird cherry and wild cherry. The bird cherry actually was on our red data list. It was very, very rare, but it has actually done well in recent years, and it's been taken off the list. But it depends where you are in the country. We've lots of it growing down here in Laois, but up in South Dublin, North Wicklow, where I come from originally, I never came across it. So it likes the limey areas here, and they've very different growth patterns. So the flowers are quite different. They have nice racemes of a group of flowers on the bird cherry, and then the wild cherry is kind of single flowers, little bit more like what you'd see on other cherries that you might know, but both are lovely and great for in the garden or in hedges.
Would I be right in saying that bird cherry might be a lower growing?
No,
Anytime I've ever seen it, you see it's been kind of shrubby
yeah,
if it's
no,
been just
here
young.
it'll grow to 20 foot easily.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's just depends if it's in a hedge and it's cut back, fair enough. That's where it might be shrubby, but no, it can grow some nice and tall too.
Great. Excellent. Thanks very much. Gobnet, I see you have a hand raised.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks so much for the videos. They're absolutely fantastic. I had a question about erecting bat boxes in suburban areas. It's something we get asked quite often around various environmental groups, and some have tried to put them up and follow the instructions, like away from light and above 3 meters and all that kind of thing. But from your studies, have you found many of them have been occupied, or is there much point in putting them up?
Maybe Donna might like to take that one. Would you, Donna? You might just need to unmute.
Um, yes, the bat boxes really get used a lot. Often by single bats. And actually, I think one of the first bat box projects that we ever did was in St. Anne's Park years and years ago, and they were made by prisoners in one of the prisons, and obviously, people who were kind of like myself in that they hadn't got the faintest clue how to do any carpentry, and they were really great at all. And but anyway, we got them and we put them up, and we thought nothing's ever going to use them. And years later, we went back, and there was actually droppings in quite a few of them. And also we just noticed with the bad storm there on Friday, we all the bats moved into bat boxes that were in very sheltered places. So like in our big barn, where obviously maybe the trees they were in were moving around, and we lost a lot of trees. But the bats seemed to wake them up. Now one of them, we have an enormous rocket box, and a tree came down and hit it, but the box still stood. And the bat. So actually, we always have 8 bats that we keep an eye on, and 7 of them are present and correct. So it looks like that looks good. Even though we lost a lot of our mature trees came down. So I would say go with them. And sometimes they even use boxes just now and again just to shelter in, when they're going somewhere. So like it's never a dead loss having them. You know, they may not be maternity roosts, but they're you know, you're providing something, all right. I would definitely put them up.
And would you say, Donna, you know, to kind of, I mean, I know obviously the wooden ones are cheaper. There's kind of a little bit of a, it's a kind of a toss up, isn't it? Because you know, the wooden ones can sometimes rot, and it's kind of only when there's, it can take bats a while to find them.
Yeah, yeah. I actually I saw a student project, and they were like, you know, the cream of the crop, the ones that all the bats, the pipistrelles love are specklers, and I've even had a pipistrelle try to get into the box while I was nailing it to a tree. Like they
So
absolutely love these
so
things.
just to explain Schwegler boxes to anybody who doesn't know, they're woodcrete, so they're basically a mixture of sawdust and concrete, and so their thermal kind of characteristics are just quite stable. They're thick, kind of concretey structures, you know, compared to a thinner wooden panel. So sorry, continue, Donna.
Yeah, and actually, there's a group, a place called, I think, Quick Crop. And they're an Irish company, and they're now selling these things.
Okay.
So they're great. But also, like the timber boxes do get used as well quite a bit. And if you can put them in a very sheltered place, we have a lot of them in barns, and the bats are in them all the time.
Okay.
So if you can put them in any kind of sheltered place at all, they last a good while. You can also paint them. Obviously, you have to be very careful. Wood preservative. But the timber ones are nice because you can get a whole group of kids doing them, or transition year people doing it, and they last a couple of years. And you know, you're hoping as well that in that time cracks will have developed in trees. You know, so they might be just a stopgap for a few years while trees are growing nearby.
Yeah, great points. I see that there's some points here about our ornamental, you know, versus wild. So, I mean, I guess this ornamental Euonymus europaeus is different from the native spindle. And
The native spindle is Euonymus europaeus.
yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. I'm actually, yeah, but just that there are a lot of euonymus species out there that aren't native. But I mean, I suppose, you know, what people want from their garden, you know, differs. I mean, it doesn't always have to be native, but you know, I suppose if you want native, you know, just to be careful.
My microphone by mistake there. That's why.
To be careful that you know, that's actually what you're getting in a garden center, or you know, to be sure that you know, you're getting the right thing. I did find that one time I bought what I thought was going to be a native Gelder rose, and when it came, it was a very beautiful flower, but it wasn't rosy. I think you told me the name of it. I can't remember. It was like a lovely candy floss flower. But unfortunately, it looks lovely, but it's not great for pollinators, because I can see I have the native one beside the non-native one, and I can see the insects all landing on the native one and not on the non-native one.
Well, I think, as your video showed with Gillian Bryan and Wild Acres, really the best way to ensure that you're getting native is to propagate yourself, because you can have things that are the same species in the garden centres, but often, you know, they're probably being raised on the continent. They're not, you know, they're not native Irish stock. So, and then you can run the risk of things cross-pollinating from your garden and out into the wild. So, but if it's in your garden space, you know, like the beautiful, you know, gardens that you had in your videos, then, you know, if you're having plants that aren't, so long as you know they're not going to be seeding all over the place outside your garden, which generally they aren't, your garden is your garden, and it can be of great value in itself.
Yeah. Rosie, you wanted to add something there?
No, just it's interesting because I'm very lucky. I have a big garden. I have 3 acres, so I have the space to put in. I have a wild meadow, which we just mow a path around. We have the log piles. In fact, we've made an extra few this week because we lost a couple of trees.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got a lot of that, and I do have a mixture of you know, native shrubs and lots of trees, oaks, and not as many now as Gilly, but there also is a place, if you choose correctly, like a lot of the open flowered things, like say if you're going to plant a rose bush, and if you want a rose bush, maybe choose something with an open flower, because a lot of those ones, there's a lovely one called Golden Wings and a fabulous one called Tottering by Gently. And if you look those up, they have this gorgeous open flower, which makes the pollen kind of more available. So, and I think I was telling you last week, Niamh, that Alan Titchmarsh was interviewed because I think they did a survey in gardens in the UK, and he said it was good news for gardeners that, in fact, there was increased biodiversity with a mix of native and non-native. But like one of your, I think Fiona just said there, just be careful, I suppose what you do put in. But a lot of things like, oxeye daisies, and also succession planting so that there's something available. My garden is full of snowdrops at the moment. So, if you start off the season with, bulbs that you underplant the shrubs with, then there's always something available for pollinators. And like even when the weather is mild, I had Mahonia out there recently just before Christmas and some hellebores. And again, these are all great for winter pollinators, so there's I guess you just have to try and do this succession planting so that there's always something for them to have.
Yeah, yeah. And am I right? Am I right that I've heard that tulips aren't great in terms of
No,
pollinators and
no,
am I?
but daffodils are, and
Okay.
bluebells are
Yeah, bluebells, yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and the snowdrops, crocuses. I mean, I've got a lot of them, and then there's a gorgeous little one, winter aconite, which is kind of hard enough to get going. But even if you stuck with some of the basics, like the snowdrops. I mean, I'm absolutely biased because I love them, but and then there's always something. And then alliums are great for when a lot of those go over and you're waiting for maybe some of the summer things to come in. And I saw somebody commented there, I grow lots of chives. I mean, chives, they're a member of the onion family. And in fact, I leave a few of my onions that I grow. I always leave a few in the veg beds, and then they go to seed, and they're always covered in
Yeah, I've noticed
chives.
that myself. Leeks and everything. They
Yeah,
just
I
go
was
mad
I
for them.
was I was looking at a honeybee in visiting snowdrops just today,
Oh, lovely.
and it was just classic in showing the vital importance of those
Yes.
those early bulbs that
Yeah.
on a sunny day like today the bees wake up and
Yeah.
they're starving, and so yes, the snowdrops are great, and the crocuses are brilliant as well. Yeah, and actually the little muscari, the little
Sorry. Yeah,
they're super for them.
they're wonderful. I actually have all of those. My meadow is full of bulbs, and I'm
Lovely.
fill them. And then you can actually plant Narcissus lobularis, which is it's one of the very older old-fashioned kind of native ones. And
Yeah, the old types of the daffodil are great. Unfortunately, all the new ones, all the fancy ones, they're great for
color, but not.
for raising human spirits
Yeah,
springtime, but they're
yeah,
no good for
I
the
agree.
pollinators. But mixing them through then with the other bulbs then is super.
Yeah, there's a lovely late one as well, the pheasant's eye daffodil. That's actually, I always see bees on that one, and it seems to be, and it does really, really well. It'll
Very
naturally,
delicate.
yeah, and it's later, you see, so
Yeah.
it doesn't come in until May. So again, you can have the tate little tiny daffodils that come out kind of pretty much. I actually have a few out already starting to come out, and then the daffodil. So if you choose wisely, just do a little bit of reading beforehand on what you choose. There's a great seed company, what's it called? Seedaholics, and they do a wonderful section on, they sell seeds for, different, things, but one of them is for, for meadows, and they just have a great information. They really do, give a lot of information on their seeds and on what to grow. So I
Great.
find them very good.
Excellent.
Any help?
So I have some more questions coming in. There's quite a few coming in. So I have a question here early on from Liz asking, is there any advice using netting in gardens? Do bats get caught in netting? Now, personally, I do use netting in my gardens, and I make sure to tie it down quite tightly so that it's not a risk to the birds and it's fine. And I also have a fruit cage for my fruit, and I have never gotten bats caught in it. Now, I don't know, maybe Donna, you might have other experiences or knowledge of that topic. It's not something I'm particularly familiar with. Usually our bats don't tend to land.
Even when I've been trying to, doing mist netting or everything, I found it really impossible to catch bats in nets, no matter what you do. So I don't think they get caught unless there's something
Yeah,
badly wrong with them. I don't think,
yeah,
but obviously other animals, particularly hedgehogs, get caught in netting. So
okay,
that is like things like football netting. They get stuck in
okay,
netting that has a wide mesh. So I
okay.
would just be careful about that. But
Mm.
no, I've never come across bats getting caught in any netting.
So I've had some more questions about bat boxes, if you'd like to take them, Donna. Do bat boxes need to be cleaned out or any risk of spreading parasites? That's number one. And then if bat boxes haven't been used in a few years, in other words, more than 5 years, should they be relocated?
I would move them if they haven't been used in a couple of years. Yeah, just try them someplace else if they're, I would definitely do that. About them being cleaned out, it kind of depends on the type. Unfortunately, with the regular ones, they're not self-cleaning and they do need to be cleaned out every so often. A lot of the ones which the most popular one that we find to use is the wedge box. It's kind of like a triangular box, and it has a hole at the bottom, and the droppings all fall out. And the other really great thing is that you can shine a torch up, not disturb the bat at all, and you can see whether the bat's there or not. Whereas, unfortunately, with some of the boxes, like the Schregler one, you have to open the box and have a look. And that, in doing it, if there's a bat there, it disturbs the bat. They fly out, and they may not come back for months. And we even tried using a fibroscope to kind of look in, with this long, like a big kind of like an endoscope thing, a big, to see if the bats were there in the hope that this wouldn't disturb them. And unfortunately, they really hated that, even worse than us opening the box. They obviously thought a snake is coming in or something, and that freaked them out, and they wouldn't go near the box for ages afterwards. And sorry, I got distracted earlier on, but just that some bats take time to use a box. And the student project that I was looking at, it said the brown long-eared bats take about 4 years before they'll even have a look at a box. So you have to kind of take a bit of pipistrelles, move in immediately. Other species will take a lot of time before they'll think about checking out. They're just more cautious. So don't give up hope if your box isn't used.
Okay, great. And I have another question here about what else can be done to support bats with creating or keeping summer or winter roost sites. So I suppose there would be possible things to do with vegetation. So often bats, when they fly out of a building or even if it's a tree, they want to fly into vegetation as in sort of camouflage or cover. So without it being, blocking an exit, if you're talking about, I don't know, a standalone building and it's surrounded by lawn or concrete, if you can get what we call linear features or hedgerow features or tree lines or something leading to and from that building, that could be something in terms of enticing them to a building or to roost or at least investigate a site. Any other tips or suggestions, Donna?
I would put little holes in your fascia board. They love fascia board, particularly if it's timber. So just a hole the size of your thumb. They really like to be squashed. So if you put your thumb up against, where your fascia board has an apex, just put the thumb up against the wall and make a tiny hole that size. And they love that. Another thing with trees, and we're just trying that ourselves on trees, where they're taking down branches and some of the trees are dead with the ash dieback. We're cutting chainsaw cuts into the trees to make little crevices where there are none already, and in the hope that that'll just make little crevice for bats to use. So they've been doing this in other countries, but we've just started trying it ourselves on our own farm. So just horizontal chainsaw cuts in the trees when we're taking down the limbs.
Brilliant. There's one here, maybe Gillian or Brian, you might like to take this one. Recommended suppliers for native hedgerow plants. Would you know anything about that?
Native hedgerow.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, None So Hardy are a very good native tree and shrub supplier based in County Wicklow. But they, to be honest, they would deal more scale. So you'd have to buy bags of 100 of each. But even at that, I mean, for anybody that wants to grow, I mean, you can get the likes of native hawthorn, crataceous, and spindle. We talked about spindle there as well, Euonymus europaeus, and so they do all the native trees and plants. So, if somebody was planting a line of hedgerow, I mean, ideally it should be a double line, so you'd plant 6 per meter, and you could put a mixture in, and you could really source them during the winter. You get them as bare roots, and you can buy them really cheaply. You're talking about maybe a bag of hawthorn, 100 hawthorn for about €80. So you can put in a lovely wildlife hedge as opposed to putting in the likes of, if you go to a garden centre, the first thing they'll offer you is cherry laurel or gristolinia, both non-native. Cherry laurel is highly invasive, and both of them are just, sterile and make for a really poor hedge. So we have such beautiful native trees and shrubs that could constitute a lovely native hedgerow, that would support so much life in relation to, pollinators, bats, everything. So
For smaller quantities, then futureforest.ie, they will sell them as bare roots, single as bare roots, and then also a little further on in pots as well, 2 or 3 year old. So, and they deliver nationwide. So you can, if you just want to have 1 or 5 or 10, you can buy them in smaller quantities. So it depends what you're looking for. But on their website, there's a lot of information, detailed information, very easy to access, and you'll be able to see what's native versus non-native on their website. So it's very good, futureforest.ie.
Yeah,
Great.
I use them. They're very good.
Yeah. Excellent. Sorry, Fiona.
Sorry, Niamh, I was just going to say, Trees on the Land is a charity that specialises in collecting native Irish seed and propagating them, and then supplying them as little 1-year-old whips free to all the community groups I work with get them from them every year. But they also will supply to people who have gardens, large gardens, but you need to order from them. Usually it's in around kind of September, October, and then they will be posted out to you. Now they're being posted out now. So it's just, and they have been doing a lot of work on making sure that it's Irish propagated stock, because we've had so many problems with trees being planted that are bringing in disease.
Great. Brilliant.
They're doing a big giveaway at the moment as well, aren't they?
That's what they do. You order from them in the autumn, and then they're delivered now at this time of year. It's always free. Well, they're funded by philanthropists who want money to go towards biodiversity projects. So it does work very well. So I mean, they are, as somebody said there, they're very heavily subscribed now as people get to know them better. But they will be able to up things once they have an idea of the orders they need. Then they are improving, increasing the numbers every year.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. So there's been a bit of chat, I think, on the chat about herbs. We didn't really get to herbs in the videos, but herbs are great for pollinators, also for the kitchen, and also just for wildlife in general. So there's a lot of them, the sages, lavender, thyme, mints, rosemary, all of those are really good. And you'll notice that a lot of them are actually blue and kind of mauve flowers. So they're probably good also then for nighttime pollinators. And they have that sort of long tube-like flower, which is probably, pollinated a lot by moths. So our nighttime insects that the bats will be feeding on. So those are great. Have many purposes, fulfill many purposes, as well as being good for wildlife. There's various recommendations. People are just saying to be careful of three-cornered leek and Spanish bluebells, which is a good call. Have people done any GPS tracking or radio tracking with bats? So you've done that in Australia, Claire. Excellent. Yeah. So there's been a little bit of radio tracking of bats in Ireland, mainly for specific research. An example would be recent research or recent radio tracking done in is it Bushy Park, and that was to do with a particular development. I think the Greenway or something along the Dodder. There's been radio tracking of lesser horseshoe bats to do with the development of the ring road around Galway. And then for research, there's been radio tracking of Leisler's bats by PhD researchers a good while ago, and lesser horseshoe bats. So it depends really. It's obviously something that's, quite niche and, needs a lot of expertise. So it's not done a whole lot in Ireland. But, if there's a specific research program being carried out, it is done. I mean, one of the problems with the Irish bats is they're so tiny, and it means that you have to have a really, really tiny battery, really tiny transmitter on the bat, or else it'll be too heavy and it won't be able to fly. So generally those transmitters don't last very long, so you'd only be a kind of a 2-week window where you'd get a signal from them. So it's just one of the things that they have to bear in mind when they're doing it. I've never done it myself. Okay, so trees on the land, future forests, native, great. A question for Gilly and Brian. I'm looking for native bog, wetland marginals for new community pond in Cabra, specifically marsh marigold and water avens. Any ideas?
I missed that. Any ideas where to source them, was it?
I presume it must be where to source them. That's connecting Cabra.
Future Forest.
Future Forest.
Yeah, .ie, very good in relation to aquatic plants as well. Yeah, very good.
I mean, there'll be a lot of others we'd recommend as well, just marginals, the likes of yellow flag iris and purple loose stripes and meadow sweets, and there's so many more as well. So
that's something to be really careful of in terms of purchasing aquatic plants, because there's a lot of garden centres that will have the natives and non-natives together in the same bath when they're selling them. So I think be really cautious about that if you see a garden centre doing that. They obviously don't really know what they're doing. Whereas if you order through Future Forest, you kind of pretty you're guaranteed that you're getting the right thing, so yeah, I mean, if it's a countryside pond, we'd always suggest to let it colonize naturally. Obviously it's different in urban ponds, garden ponds. If the garden pond isn't rural, definitely, yeah, you're going to need to buy them. So just be very careful with the aquatic plants.
yeah,
certainly, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, just on that, I mean, just as a feature for bats and for wildlife, the ponds are just incredible, any size, and we would always sort of advocate that fairly strongly. That's as a measure for biodiversity and for bringing in biodiversity almost instantaneously. A pond of any size and we're at number, I think, 45 or 44 wild acres, and they're the smallest being an upcycled guinea pig cage base, right the way up to a football size pitch size, and any size in between. But they're just incredible for supporting wildlife. And as Julie says, if it's in the countryside, you really don't need anything. You don't need to plant at all. I mean, our largest pond was excavated and we just let it colonize completely naturally, and everything came of its own accord, as nature does. It's phenomenal. It's a methodology of seed dispersal, and seeds come in, wildlife comes in. all the wild, a lot of the aquatic invertebrates can fly, diving beetles and water scorpions and the whole lot. And obviously then you've so many emergent insects supporting bats. So yeah, incredible for biodiversity, incredible measure to take for biodiversity.
Great. And while we have you on there, we may as well, we can plug your the work that you do. I mean, you offer courses during the year, isn't that right? Brian and Jilly down in Wild Acres. So if people go to
Yeah.
wildacres.ie, you can book yourself onto a course. Might be on pond making, or remind me what other topics you often cover. Developing a meadow.
Yeah, creating wildlife ponds, gardening for biodiversity, creating a nature reserve of any size. So that kind of covers anyone, from having a large garden, acres of land. So it's about creating loads of different habitat, your land, nature experience, which is really just all about connecting in with nature and enjoying that space with like-minded people. And then we're going to be doing a bat and moth experience this year for the first time. That'll be an evening event, and hopefully in wildacres.ie inquire and book into events there. So thanks, Niamh, for that.
Yeah, thank you.
No bother. So
Hello.
also, yeah.
Sorry, can I just say, for anyone, in case anybody doesn't know, I actually built a pond this year. It's about 25 meters squared for free because I did the Hare's Corner. I think it's called the Hare's Corner
Oh,
grant.
yes.
So if anybody else
Yeah.
wants to build a pond, like it doesn't have to be that big, obviously. I just had the sticks. But
So what you're talking about is the Hare's Corner grant. Is that
Yeah.
so you received grant
Yeah.
aid, and was that maybe with a mini digger to help hire the
Yeah.
mini digger?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So that's it's Burren Bio that runs that scheme, isn't that right? And it was available to certain local authorities in 2024. I don't know what they're going to be doing this year.
Yeah, they did mead this year for the first time, which is why I could get it. Before that, they weren't doing mead, so I'd say they'll probably do it again. I mean, so.
Yeah. So basically, they were providing the funds to just do that basic work of ground clearance and getting it started. So that's great. Yeah, hopefully they'll make that available again this year. Tanya's mentioned Cara Hurley Nursery, which is, I think, Ireland's only organic registered, certified nursery. And it's out over in County Clare, so it's great for native and non-native plants. That's a great call out there. Thanks very much, Tanya. Any tips for supporting bats in very urban environments? Okay, so Donna, would that be a you topic? You've done a lot of work. I know you'd worked with Connecting Cabra and various other organisations in urban areas.
Yeah, and actually, probably Stephen, who's on this meeting, probably could talk more about this than me, because what Connecting Cabra did was I worked with them. On one side they have the Royal Canal, on the other side they've got the Phoenix Park, and the middle is Cabra. And because there's a lot of houses, there's a lot of concrete. There's a lot of roads, and people have. There's not much parking, so people have concreted over the gardens to park their cars in. So I think Stephen could probably talk about this better than me. But what they decided to do, we put bat detectors out, static detectors, in a couple of people's gardens to see where the bats were and what were they doing. And Stephen's garden had, I think, 5 species of bats, and it was the only place that we got bats feeding. And all the other gardens had about 2 species of bat. So then we decided that we wanted to make a whole load of Stephen's gardens all throughout Cabra. So Stephen, honestly, Stephen, you could really talk about this a lot better than me. But Stephen has been giving out seeds from his garden, and they've been helping people put out ponds. They've been putting out free trees, and you probably see the picture there. Stephen got a grant for to put in a pond, and then persuaded the local priest to let him put in a pond in the priest's near the church. And actually, at the last talk that I gave, two very elderly nuns came up and told me an exciting bit of news that the Pope apparently has written to all the priests saying you must give over about 20% of your land for biodiversity. So the nuns decided they were going to get their hands on it. So this was their plan. So this is, the Pope has sent these instructions. So that is kind of an urban space that we can now all use for biodiversity, or certainly the nuns are very keen on this. So there is these spaces, but honestly, Stephen, probably you want to say more, answer that question better than me. If you're there, Stephen.
Yeah. Hi, Donna. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yeah, I suppose, Cabra is fairly densely populated and built up, and I suppose, yes, we have great gardens. It was built to move people out of tenements. So some of the gardens are great, are really big, and so obviously, this is perfect. Gardening for bats is the way to go, or wildlife in general. But yeah, I was asking the guys from Wild Acres, specifically, I'm just on a mission to get marsh marigold. Obviously, it's nice early flowering just to get the succession. The pond, yeah, again, Donna and Brian were absolutely fantastic as our ecologists. Gave us so much advice, and they know Cabra very well. Brian being from Fossa, grew up in Cabra, so we had that connection. And what was I going to say? Yeah, priests, the church grounds have been, they have two very nice spaces within Cabra, and they were fairly manicured. So for the last 2 years, we've been putting in long flowering meadows, put in mini orchards, planted up about 25 meters of native hedgerow. So they've been fantastic. And then the pond was such a difficult thing to get over the line. We came up with so many obstacles, like DCC weren't interested in putting one in the park, in the park itself, for every reason under the sun that they could come up with. But and then obviously schools were afraid for insurance reasons. So and even the church weren't too keen initially, but we found a nice beside the grotto. So you have people saying a rosary, and then we're there pond dipping and so it's great. It's great for the community. So anyway, sorry, I'm probably rambling on a bit. I don't know exactly what the question was.
I should just, if I could mention, maybe there when you mentioned schools, there is Rob Gandola, which people may have come across Rob from the TV. He's also part of the Herpetological Society of Ireland, and so he kind of specializes in putting in ponds in schools. So so he knows a lot, in relation to that whole, fencing or gridding or protecting it. Obviously, in enclosed spaces, where there's children, not going to be supervised at all times. Therefore they have to be protected. But Rob kind of specializes in that. So if anyone was needing a contact, he's a good guy to contact about that.
I suppose that what started us off there was tips for urban spaces, particularly when there's a lot of concrete and hard surfaces. And I suppose having given it a bit of thought for some biodiversity plans I've had to do myself, it was kind of the approach I would take was kind of connections and trying to make connections along streets or at the backs of houses, and think about not just meadows, but also what can go into planters, what can go up walls, what can clamber and be from maybe even in window boxes. You can connect streets in other ways than just having green space as such. You can also think vertically. I know it's a lot more maintenance, and it is a lot more. I have to admit myself personally, I'm not great gardening in pots. Things tend to die on me because I I concentrate on my veg garden. But you know, you can think in other ways if you can kind of use your imagination to kind of push out the boat a bit about what's possible and what you can do with small little corners and spaces and window boxes and clambering plants, and start from that point of view, maybe, rather than thinking, oh, we need to put a park here or something, you know. What can you do?
Grow
Just
so
like,
many things. Yeah.
yeah, you can grow so many things. I mean, even window boxes, you know.
But I mean, even I think what people, they plant something and then in a pot, and
Yeah.
then just think it's going to survive by itself. But just the thing to remember
It
with pots,
doesn't. No.
because you know it's going
No,
to
it doesn't.
naturally do better in the ground. So you just have to remember that it depends on you for its water and its food. So it would be, you'd have to feed and water much more in pots. So in the summer, it's worth investing in just saucers to put underneath. And then and then choose your plants, you know, wisely, because not everything will thrive in a pot. Like I wouldn't put a rose in a pot, and that wouldn't be very good anyway. But you can put daisies, you can put dahlias, and if you choose dahlias, which are beautiful, but if you choose the ones that, again, I get back to the, you know, the open face, they're fantastic, and they all do really, really well in pots. And just buy a couple of those saucers so that that cuts down on the watering, because otherwise you're watering and feeding and it's all going through and just going into the gravel underneath. And just if so I think did Stephen want marsh marigold? I have a wet ditch with marsh marigold and flag irises, and he's welcome to any of it. If he wants a little cutting of I can do a cutting or, you know, division of the marsh marigold if he can't get it. Ratoath Garden Centre is near me, and I find them very good for water plants. They seem to have a lot. And that's where I got the marsh marigolds there, you know, 10 years ago. I see them, I mean, I have them now, so I don't bother buying them anymore. But if you'd like, I can get into the ditch and dig up a bit. That's no problem. If he's
Great.
That would be lovely. You're in Mead, is it? Or
Yeah,
not too far from...
I can give it to Niamh.
Oh no, I said, are you in Mead?
Oh,
You're
yes, I
somewhere in
am.
Mead?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
in Sligo.
Sure, I'd love to see your garden as well, so I might pop down.
Absolutely.
And while we're on the topic of seeing Rosie's garden, Rosie, I believe that you have a charity event coming up shortly.
I do actually. Next Saturday the 8th, we're having a snowdrop day, just to raise funds for twin boys who have Duchenne's disease. They need to get to America, so we're having a fundraising day, a snowdrop day, snowdrop extravaganza. So it's on my page, the Insomniac Gardener.
And is that page on Instagram or
It's
Facebook?
on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great stuff. So if people, Tanya says, if people do have lighting in their garden or in a public space for security, is there any benefit to using LED lights or certain coloured bulbs in these spaces? Okay, so you're saying so it's basically what's recommended from a bat point of view is going into the amber spectrum. The warmer it is, the better. Was that your point, Tanya?
Yeah, it was just obviously we can't always have. I've no lighting in my back garden, but you know, the neighbours won't always agree with that. So I was just wondering if I know with the car-based bat survey, you've been looking at the lighting colours too. So I was wondering, like it's been years since I've done it, so I'm not sure how the LED lights are showing up on that, if there's any.
Well, they are impacting on bat activity for sure. The trouble is that now with LEDs, you've got a whole different range of spectra. You know, the older they are, the colder. And now as it goes on, they're starting to become that little bit warmer. So from the car-based bat monitoring, it's very difficult to get any kind of clear picture of what's going on because
it's hard to tell which one's there.
It's hard to tell what's there when people just drive by, and it's very broad brush.
Okay, yeah.
But I know in Eurobats, the Eurobats guidelines, it is warmth. I always get this wrong. Is it greater than 2,700 or less than 2,700? Whichever is warmer.
I can't remember now. Off the top of my head. That's why I asked the question.
That's in degrees Kelvin. And wavelength, it's the opposite way around. for 550. Oh yeah. Anyway, but the you can find the guidelines, the Eurobats guidelines, on the Eurobats website. And in fact, I should just look that up for you guys, and we can send it on afterwards.
I know, I remember from works that I've done in the past, they the lights that are really low down and that are kind of really artistic and cutesy looking were really bad in gardens for bats, because there's just so much light spill and for dark skies and stuff like that. But a lot of the modern lights, the benefit was, I think this probably talked about in the last conference. And there was lighting experts in there, wasn't there? It could have been from there, and they were saying that all of the modern lights are so directional now that it can be really beneficial to use those modern lights, because you can make sure that there isn't light going where you don't want it going, you know. And for security, like, people are going to want to use lights, aren't they, you know?
Yeah. I mean, well, like we said in the video, really, we would recommend that people put them on timers so that they're not,
or motion detectors as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So somebody said, is there a density of planting on walls, for example, that would help bats? So I'm not too sure if that refers to clambering plants. I mean, just having plants, having green anywhere is beneficial to biodiversity. Having green, ivy, clambering roses, honeysuckle, anything like that. Anything that boosts biomass, boosts biodiversity is good for wildlife in general and bats.